he found her barefoot, just standing there in the red dirt with a paper-wrapped bundle clutched to her chest like something inside it might break if she breathed wrong. She was small, but not as small as she looked from the porch. Skinny in the way hunger shapes you, clothes loose, collarbone like a blade. The wind kept blowing strands of hair into her face, but she didn't flinch, just stared. The ranch dog was the one who alerted him, barked twice, then whimpered and sat down. That's what made Clint step out, what made him pause. He looked down the trail and saw her. Not a runaway, not some neighbor's lost girl. Just there, still, looking at him like she'd already decided something. "You lost?" Clint asked, not moving from the steps. The girl didn't answer at first. Then, in a voice so calm it unsettled him more than if she'd been crying, she said, "My mama died today." Clint blinked. "Where's your pa?" "Don't have one." "How'd you get out here?" "Walked." He looked past her, down the trail. No wagon, no dust, no horse. "How far?" She shrugged. "A while." Silence stretched between them. Then, softly, she added, "Can I spend a day with you, rancher?" Clint didn't know why the word hit him the way it did. Rancher. Like it wasn't his name, but it was who he was, and somehow she saw that clearer than most folks he knew. He rubbed his jaw. "Just one day." She nodded. "One day." He stared at her for a long moment, then stepped back from the door and opened it. She didn't ask for food, but he gave her a plate anyway. Bacon, cornbread, thick black coffee she only dipped her fingers into. She sat at the edge of the table, barely taking up any space, eyes on everything, like she was cataloging it in her mind. He didn't ask her name. She didn't offer one. By midday, she'd followed him to the barn. Didn't talk much, just helped. Held boards while he hammered. Climbed fences like she'd been born to them. The bundle never left her side. "You hungry again?" he asked around dusk. She shook her head. "You sleep yet?" "No." He squatted beside her as she sat near the fence line, watching the cows graze against the painted sky. "You got someone to take you in?" "No." "You run from something?" "No. Just walking." "You know one day here won't change what happened?" "I don't want it to," she said. "I just want to remember what it felt like to not be leaving." That night it stormed. Clint built a fire and laid out a blanket near the hearth for her, but she stayed upright, eyes on the flames. The bundle rested beside her, untouched. He wanted to ask what was in it, but something told him not to. Not yet. He watched her from the rocker. When she finally spoke, it wasn't to him. Not exactly. She didn't say goodbye. Clint waited. She just closed her eyes and left. He leaned forward. "I don't think mamas know how to say goodbye," he said. "She should have tried," the girl whispered. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. Morning came quietly. No roosters, no wind, just that still, soft light that made everything look gentler than it was. She was gone from the hearth, but the bundle was still there. Clint stepped outside and saw her near the back pasture, barefoot again, walking in slow circles through the dew. "You said just one day," he called to her. She turned, nodded. "I know. You going?" "Soon." He walked out to her, boots soft in the wet grass. "Where?" She looked toward the horizon, then back at him. "I thought maybe I'd keep walking until something felt like her again." Clint swallowed. "You won't find her out there." "I know. But you can stay." She blinked. "You said just one day." "I know what I said," Clint replied. "But maybe I changed my mind." The girl tilted her head. "Why?" He looked at her. Really looked at her. The thinness. The hurt behind the calm. The way she held her silence like armor. "Because this place could use one more soul that knows how to survive." She didn't answer. Just walked back toward the porch, picked up the bundle and came to stand beside him. "She was wrapped in this when she went," she said softly, then handed it to him. Inside wasn't a body, just a worn photograph, a comb, a pair of shoes too small now, and a note, crumpled and nearly unreadable. "If I go, find the rancher, the one with the quiet dog." Clint's throat tightened. The girl didn't look up. You can stay, he said again, quieter this time. Forever if you want. And for the first time since she arrived, she let the bundle drop, then took his hand, and didn't let go. The shoes stayed there for 3 days. Worn leather, dull from time, toes scuffed in a way only hard walking could do. One heel leaned inward like it had always carried too much weight on one side. But she set them gently, side by side on the front porch, like her mama was still coming back to slip them on. And though the winds rolled in heavy that week, kicking up dust, tugging at the tin roof, moaning through the fence posts, not a single gust dared move those shoes. Clint noticed it first. On the second morning, he stepped out with coffee in hand and found them exactly as she'd placed them. No tilt, no shift, no trace of the night storm that had blown over the back hills like it wanted to tear the sky open. The girl stood behind him, quiet. You see that? He asked. She nodded. The wind won't touch them. He looked at her. You think that's because of her? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She was different now. Still silent in that way only grief teaches, but something else lived beneath it. The stillness she carried before was a survival kind. Tight, practiced, full of restraint. Now it was something deeper, like she was listening to things nobody else could hear. She walked the fence lines before dawn, checked on the animals without being asked, and never once forgot the shoes on the porch. Every evening she sat near them. Sometimes she'd talk, barely above a whisper. Sometimes she'd hum. Clint didn't pry, but he noticed how the ranch dog never crossed between the shoes, how the chickens stopped clucking when she was near, how the wind always dropped to a hush the moment her fingers touched the porch rail. Something was settling, not just her, something in the land. That third night, just after supper, she asked if she could move the shoes. Clint blinked, surprised. They belong to her, she said. But they're in your home now. Clint sat forward, elbows on his knees. You believe she's still in them? No, she said. I believe she's watching. And waiting. Waiting for what? For me to decide where I put her. He nodded slowly. And where is that? She looked past him into the growing dark. I don't know yet. She didn't move the shoes that night, but she didn't sit beside them either. She stood at the gate, just staring into the empty road. The next morning, the shoes were gone. Clint stepped out, coffee in hand again, but the porch boards were bare. The wind came in low and lazy, brushing the grass in soft waves, but never stirred the dust where the shoes had been. He didn't panic, didn't call out, just turned and looked toward the barn. There she was, and the shoes were in her hands. She wasn't walking, she was waiting. He met her in the yard. You sure? He asked. No, she said. But it's time. He didn't question, just followed her. They walked for 2 hours, through the pasture and into the dry creek, then further, into the cottonwoods where the land dipped just enough to feel like a cradle. It was quiet there, soft. The air smelled like cedar and soil. She knelt, set the shoes down side by side against the base of a twisted tree. Not buried, not hidden, just placed. She never had a resting place, she whispered. Clint squatted beside her. This it? She nodded. She walked all her life, but here, it's still. It's not chasing her anymore. She stood slowly, brushed the dirt from her knees, then turned, and walked away. After that, things changed. She didn't talk more, but she spoke in other ways. Fixed things that had been broken for years. Painted the back wall of the barn without being asked. Started leaving slices of cornbread wrapped in cloth for Clint after long rides. Sometimes she sat under the big oak near the cattle trough, writing in a little leather book he never saw her carry. The shoes stayed where she'd placed them, and the wind still refused to move them. Even during the worst storm that fall, when trees bent sideways and shingles peeled like paper, the cottonwood grove remained untouched. Clint rode out after the rain. He had to see it for himself. And there they were, dry, clean, still. One evening, weeks later, he found her on the porch again. But this time she had her feet tucked under her and was shelling pecans into a bowl. He sat beside her, hands rough from fence work. "You still talk to her?" he asked. "Sometimes," she answered. "She doesn't have to." He thought on that a while, then looked at her with a half smile. "You still planning to stay just one day?" She shook her head. "That day already passed." "And the next one?" She looked at him, eyes steady. "I don't count days anymore," she said. "I count how many mornings feel like hers." "And how many is that?" She looked out toward the hills, where the light was softening like an old song. "This one," she said, "and maybe the next." Clint leaned back, let the porch creak beneath him. Somewhere in the trees, an owl hooted once, and the wind paused, just for a moment, like it was listening too. It started with the well, not the one by the barn where Clint drew water each morning. The old one, the one sealed with rusted boards and braced with stone, half swallowed by weeds. He hadn't touched it in 20 years. Said the water had dried up long before he bought the land. It was the kind of thing folks built dreams around once, then forgot when the land proved too hard for dreaming. But she saw it, like it had called her. That morning was colder than most. Mist rolled low and slow across the ranch, and the horizon sat heavy and blue. Clint was checking the cattle when she wandered out past the hog pen, down the slope, and toward the forgotten edge of the field. He saw her silhouette between the mesquites. She wasn't wandering. She was following something, steady, intent, like she knew. By the time he caught up, she was kneeling by the well, brushing away the loose weeds and dead leaves with her bare hands. "You shouldn't be near this one," Clint said gently. "It's not safe." She didn't look at him. "There's something buried here," she murmured. He stepped closer. "You sure?" She nodded. "She told me last night." He said nothing, just crouched beside her. The rocks were cold. The dirt was tight with age. But as she peeled back the brush and loosened the earth, something metallic shimmered beneath. She dug with her hands, slow but sure. Then her fingers hit tin. It was a small box, rusted at the hinges, dented at the lid. She held it like a memory she wasn't ready to remember. Clint watched her carefully, but said nothing. The weight of the air between them said more than words could. She sat back on her heels, wiped the dirt from the lid, and opened it. Inside was a folded cloth yellowed with time, a ring of dried cornflowers, faded hair ribbon, a copper button with a scratch through its center, and at the very bottom, a brittle sheet of paper, folded into a perfect square. She opened it carefully. Clint looked away, giving her the space. But in the hush that followed, he heard the breath catch in her throat. Then she read it aloud. Not for him, but for the wind, for the well, for her mama. Asterisk, if you find this, baby girl, it means you were listening. I hid it here where the land drinks memory, because what I couldn't say, I needed to leave. I'm sorry for every night I couldn't hold you. I'm sorry for every day I kept us moving when all you wanted was stillness. But I see now. Stillness was always your gift. If you stay somewhere, let it be where your name is said with care. And if a man opens his door without fear, stay. Don't be me. Be the part one never got to be. Asterisk. She folded the letter slowly, pressed it to her chest, and for the first time since Clint had known her, she cried. Not quietly, not in silence, but open, raw, and deep, like her whole body was trying to remember what grief sounded like. Clint sat beside her. He didn't speak, didn't touch her, just stayed until the sobs turned to breath, and the breath turned to silence again. That night, she didn't sit on the porch. She walked the fence line, alone. Clint watched her from the barn window. She stopped at every post, touched it, whispered something. Sometimes she looked back toward the well. Sometimes she looked straight up into the stars. When she came back inside, her eyes were clearer. The tired had lifted from her shoulders. She was still grieving, but now she carried something, and it carried her. The next morning, the tin box was gone. She'd buried it again. Same place, same care. But now she marked it with 3 white stones, arranged in a triangle so perfect Clint knew it wasn't just for memory. It was a sign, not for her, but for whatever came next. A few days passed. Then one afternoon, She asked Clint to sit with her by the well. She brought 2 cups of coffee. Black, hot, just like he liked it. They sat on the edge of the clearing, watching the wind bend the tall grass. She was scared, the girl said softly. All the time. She kept moving because of that? Clint asked. She nodded. But she left the note, he said. She wanted you to stop. She didn't know how. You do. She turned to him, something steel set behind her eyes. I think I'm learning. By the end of the week, she'd unpacked her things. All 3 of them. A comb, a single photograph, and her mama's ribbon, now tied around the doorknob of her room. She didn't ask if she could stay. She just did. Because some places don't require permission. They only need presence. And Clint understood. One morning, he found her barefoot by the old well again, talking to the earth like it was listening. The ranch dog lay beside her, not barking, just watching. She smiled when Clint approached. There's more here, she said. In the ground. In the silence. He didn't ask what. Didn't need to. Some silences aren't empty. They're waiting. It was past midnight when she tapped softly on his door. Not with fear. Not with urgency. Just a quiet knock, like a child asking if someone else was still awake. Clint had been sitting on the edge of his bed, boots off, listening to the silence settle over the ranch. The wind had died. The coyotes weren't howling. Even the old barn, which usually groaned in the dark, had gone still. He opened the door and found her standing barefoot, her eyes not frightened, but full. I heard her, she said. Clint nodded slowly. Your mama. She nodded. She was humming. I used to hear it when I was little when we camped under trees. But tonight it came through the wall. He didn't ask if she was sure. He didn't need to. Some sounds don't belong to memory. They belong to the moment. They sat on the porch in the dark. Just the 2 of them. A lantern glowed soft between them. Her knees were pulled to her chest. Clint sat forward, elbows resting on the rail. Then she reached out, gently, pressed her hand against his chest. Can you hear it? She asked. He looked down at her fingers, calloused and warm. Your mama? He asked. No, she said. The hum. The way the air carries it when you listen through someone else's skin. He closed his eyes, and he listened. At first, all he heard was his own breathing, the familiar thump of his heart, the ache in his knees from the long day's work. But then there it was, faint, like a thread running through the world. A sound not quite sound, a vibration that moved just behind everything, like a voice whispered beneath the wind. Not in words, but in knowing. He exhaled. Yes, he said. She smiled. It's always been there, she said. I just forgot how to let others hear it. The next day something shifted. Not in the ranch, but between them. He found her standing in the barn's shadow at sunrise, eyes closed, head tilted like she was listening to something just above the trees. She didn't turn when he approached, but she reached for his hand. Clint, a man who hadn't touched another human with tenderness in years, didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, just let her fingers wrap around his. They stood that way for a long time. No words, no movement, just breath and earth and air. Later, over coffee, she asked him, when did you stop talking to the people who left? Clint was quiet. After my brother died, he finally said. We buried him up in the north pasture. I talked to him every day for 2 years. Then one day, I stopped hearing him. Why? Maybe I wasn't listening the same. Or maybe he thought you didn't need him anymore, she said. Clint looked down into his mug. Maybe. She reached across the table and set her fingers over his hand again. He's still there, she whispered. You just stopped walking where his voice lives. That night, Clint walked to the north pasture for the first time in years. The stars hung low, heavy with heat. The grass had grown tall, brushing his jeans. He didn't bring a lantern, didn't need one. He knew the way. The headstone was small, faded, but his boots found it like they always had. He stood there a while, then knelt. Hey, Nate, he said, voice rough. The wind answered, not loud, not soft, but present. And Clint wept. The kind of weeping that comes from hearing something you forgot you needed to. In the morning, she knew. You went to him, she said as she poured his coffee. He didn't ask how she knew. He just nodded. It helped. I think I remembered how to hear him, Clint said. She smiled, and her eyes filled again. Not with sorrow this time, but with something steadier. Peace. From then on, she walked the ranch differently. Not lighter, not quieter, but rooted. Each step had weight but not burden. Like she belonged to the land now, and the land knew it. She didn't speak to her mama out loud every day, but when she did, it was with clarity. Like they were writing a letter together, and the answers came back in wind and color. Clint saw it too. In the way the cattle stopped when she approached. In how the barn creaked when she sang. In the strange, sweet stillness that settled over the porch when she sat with her feet up, combing her hair slowly in the late sun. One morning, she found Clint in the shed, looking through old boxes. He held up a photo. Faded, sun-bleached, bent at the corner. That your brother? She asked. He nodded. She took the photo in her hands. He looks like you, she said. Only louder. Clint chuckled. Yeah. He never did anything quiet. She studied the photo a long moment. Do you want to hear him again? She asked. Clint's throat tightened. I already did. Then let's make it permanent, she said. That afternoon, they went to the north pasture together. She brought a small wooden box. Inside was a ribbon, a feather she'd found at the well, a handful of earth from the front porch, and a dried sunflower. This is for your brother, she said. So he knows you didn't forget. So the land remembers, too. They buried it beside the stone. Not for ceremony. Not for closure. Just for connection. That evening, she put her hand on Clint's chest again. Same place. Same silence. Same hum. Only this time, when she asked if he could hear her mama, he didn't answer. He just smiled. Because the answer wasn't a sound anymore. It was a feeling. The fullness. Like the house, the ranch, and the people who came before were all listening with them now. The morning came quiet and softer than most. The sky had that early gold, the kind that made everything look warm before the sun even rose. Clint was out front, oiling the gate hinges, when he saw her step from the house. He froze. She wasn't in her usual boots and denim. She was wearing a dress, long faded, the color of ash and sunrise. It clung to her in the breeze like it had been waiting in a box for just that moment. And she was barefoot. She didn't say a word as she walked past him, didn't look back, just stepped into the tall grass, the hem of the dress brushing the dew like it belonged there. Clint set the oil can down slow. That dress wasn't one she'd ever worn before. And he knew, the way a man knows things without needing to ask, that it was her mama's. He followed at a distance. Not to interrupt, just to witness. The field wrapped around her like it remembered her. The cottonwoods leaned just enough to shade her shoulders. The grass bent gently beneath her steps. And Clint, he saw something in her that stopped time. Not beauty, not grace, but belonging. She didn't look like someone walking through a field. She looked like someone the field had called home. She reached the center of the clearing and turned slowly. Clint was still 20 feet behind, hat in his hands. You see it? She asked. He wasn't sure what she meant. The light, she said. She turned her face toward the sky. It was never about the sun. It's about how it moves through the places we forgot. Clint took a few slow steps forward. You're different today, he said quietly. I'm whole today, she corrected. She walked toward him, slow, the hem of her mama's dress trailing through the grass. When she reached him, she placed her hands on his shoulders. Then, without asking, she rested her forehead against his chest. Not crying, not shaking, just being. And Clint wrapped his arms around her like he had always known they'd end up right there. Together. Still. Whole. The dress smelled of cedar and something faintly sweet. Clint didn't know if it was the fabric or her or time itself. She looked up at him. You ever think about forever? She asked. He nodded. Not until recently. I think I'm ready, she said. For what? To stop running. That evening they sat on the porch together, not speaking, just sipping coffee, watching the light fade across the hills. The old wind chime on the corner of the roof clinked softly, a sound Clint hadn't heard in years because it only moved when the air was kind. And it was kind that night. She took his hand, fingers curling gently into his. I want to plant her flowers, she said. Cornflowers. The same kind she kept pressed in that box. We'll make space, Clint said. No, she smiled. There's already space. We just have to look where she left it. The next day they planted, not just cornflowers, but sage and yarrow and Indian paintbrush. She scattered seeds like blessings, around the old well, beside the porch, at the north pasture where Clint's brother rested. And every place they touched, it felt like the land exhaled. Weeks passed, then months. The dress stayed in her room, folded carefully, laid across the foot of her bed like a memory that didn't ache anymore. Sometimes she wore it when the wind was soft. Sometimes she danced in it, barefoot across the porch, Clint watching with a grin that made the lines around his eyes deepen. She laughed more now, and when she did, it sounded like summer rain. One night, after supper, she reached for his hand. Same way she had that first time, but this time her voice was steadier. I don't want to leave, she said. Clint nodded, quietly. I don't want you to, he said. She tilted her head. Then don't let me. And that was all it took. They didn't talk about marriage. Didn't need to. Some unions don't require rings or paper, just presence, just choosing. Again and again with each rising sun. Years passed. The flowers spread. The wind grew more familiar. And the porch became a place of stories. Old ones, new ones, and the ones only told in silence. People came and went, but she stayed. And Clint never stopped listening for the hum that had started everything. Sometimes it was in the fence posts, sometimes in her laugh, sometimes in the way the grass leaned when she passed. But always it was there. One morning, she stepped out onto the porch in her mama's dress. Older now, softer around the eyes, but still her. Clint was already waiting, coffee in hand. She sat beside him, took the cup, and leaned into his shoulder. I dreamt of her last night, she said. Your mama. She nodded. She was walking this field, barefoot, just like I used to. He wrapped an arm around her, kissed her temple. She's still here. I know. They sat there until the sun rose, and the world hummed beneath them, because some people don't go. Not really. They become the land, the wind, the quiet that holds a home together. And when someone listens just right, they never leave again.